Hi, and welcome to this edition of Peak Life. Today we're going to be talking about the Police Forensic Unit, and joining me is Licata, Evidence Technician. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. What is the primary job and goal of the Forensic Unit?
So the Forensic Unit is responsible for responding to crime scenes, and predominantly we are responsible for documenting and preserving evidence.
So does the unit respond to all crime scenes?
Essentially, in Chesapeake, we are responsible for responding to anything from a simple car break-in all the way up to a homicide and pretty much everything in between.
Okay. So how many people in the unit?
We have 5 people. We like to say we have 5.5. We have an additional latent print examiner who can come help us out. So we're a relatively small unit. We're all civilians. And so we cover everything in the entire city of Chesapeake.
And you guys work night and day?
Yes, we have a rotating schedule, so we'll be on days for about a month, and then we switch over to being on nights.
Okay. So you were kind enough, because we followed you around a bit. You invited us to come take a look at the office and the labs. Can you tell us about some of the equipment that you use that helps you do your job?
So one of the big things that we do on our end is we process and try and find fingerprints. So we have a lot of equipment dedicated to that. We can photograph fingerprints, so we have an entire photograph set up. We can process fingerprints with chemical techniques. We can use the powder techniques that a lot of people have seen on TV, so we can do all of that. And that helps us with it depends on the type of medium that the fingerprints can be on. So we have a lot of different abilities and processing techniques that we can use, and we have them all at our lab.
Now, I know we did get to see like a dryer. Can you talk about that a little bit? How does that work with fingerprints?
So we cannot process fingerprints easily when they're wet, when the item is wet. So we have drying rooms so we can dry items. We actually have a cabinet for drying items if we need something to dry a little bit quicker. And then we also have a chamber that we use with, it's called super glue fuming. So it essentially takes what you know is super glue and it will vaporize it, and then the particles of that glue will actually adhere to the items in that chamber and help develop fingerprints, so we can either see them better or then use techniques later on. And so that's something that's been around for years, and a lot of people have actually heard of that, and it's something that we use on a regular basis.
And it was pretty cool to see the drying device.
Yes.
So you also had, I noticed like when we were there, you also had like a bay where you can pull a car in.
Yes.
So that's in case there's evidence in a vehicle?
Yes, we regularly will have to process vehicles. If someone's car is broken into, we'll process that on scene. But occasionally for more serious crimes like a homicide or something of that nature, we have to bring the car back to our compound because we have to preserve the car itself for evidence, or we're looking for additional evidence on the vehicle. And so we have bays or just large garage ports, so we can bring the vehicles in so that they're protected from the environment, and we have a more secure location while we process them.
I know you had a lot of bikes and things like that, and different vehicles, some that had been in crashes and, of course, like you said, involved in a potential homicide or something.
Yes, we have a small compound at our facility where we can maintain cars and vehicles for homicides, for accident fatalities. So if there's a serious accident where someone is killed or if someone's severely injured, when our crash team unit comes out, we can maintain those vehicles as well. And so we keep those at our lot for an almost indefinite amount of time until the judicial process has seen its way through, or we've gotten clearance that they can be removed. So we keep those serious cars in our facility. So we have some cars that have been there for longer than some people have even been in the unit, like myself.
So I think there's also a ballistic database. Is that correct?
Yes, it's called NIBIN. It's the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. The shell casings or the cartridge casings, which a bullet is inside the casing, and then when it's fired, it's removed, and then a lot of times we find those casings on scene. And so those have very particular markings on the base of them that can be compared and used to help determine maybe what kind of gun it came from. And there's even more identifying marks, and so we have the ability to use that system as well.
That's just fascinating to me. So we had an opportunity to go on an actual crime scene with you. So let's watch the video and see you in action.
One of the first things I'll do on the scene is I'll have either the officer or the victim walk me through the location and note any areas where they know that something's disturbed or moved around. Sometimes it's obvious, like a door broken in, but something like this, I may not know that there should be a monitor on that table right there, or that they could have been moving stuff around the night before, and where that tower is perfectly normal. So I always have the victims or somebody who knows more of those details walk me through and explain all that to me, so I know where to focus my investigation part. One of the most important things we have to do is photo document, because everyone's way of writing, of describing what a place looks like, where things are located can vary slightly, but pictures are going to be able to explain that in conjunction with our reports. Me being able to describe what the damage on the door looks like versus someone looking at a picture can get a better idea of what we're talking about. So, and anytime we collect evidence, we want to be able to photograph where we located it. We're also going to write in our report where we located that, but then that combined with our pictures kind of helps tell the entire story. When a door is kicked in, I want to make sure that I photograph any of the damage on the exterior. In this case, you can definitely see there are areas where there's what looks like a potential footprint. In this case, there isn't quite enough detail for anything further, but I have the photographs of the general area, so it's showing that this area was kicked in. And even though it was kicked in, it's still very likely that they continued to push the door open or had to open it. So I always want to be sure that I also test for fingerprints. Surveillance footage is helpful, especially obviously for officers, but also for us as well. If we don't have that video footage, I just kind of have to go with my instincts, and what I'm thinking is most likely that they touched. But if we have video footage, then I can look at that and know exactly where they touched. Typically, we would like to try and do that. We call those elimination prints. So if I'm at, especially at someone's home, their fingerprints are allowed to be on surfaces in their own home. So we would try and take elimination prints from there. And those prints are just used for comparison to eliminate them from any fingerprints I would lift from a scene. They don't get put into any databases or anything like that. And we try and do that with anything that we can and is reasonable. If someone's car is broken into and I get some good prints, I would like to get the owner or the reasonable occupants of that car as well.
So how important are the findings of the unit at a crime scene like this one?
So we're kind of the last first responders sometimes. The first responders are going to be the police officers or fire department, making sure a scene is safe and collecting all that initial information. And then we respond after that. And we are collecting and preserving the evidence at that point. So that is what is going to be used by either the officers or the detectives later on to then help focus their investigation. So it's a combination of everyone. It's a fingerprint we lifted off the scene, plus the officers talking to the victims on scene at that time, plus the detective maybe looking and finding some video footage and being able to find a potential suspect through that. So it's all of our information put together. And obviously we like to think that we're pretty important, and you know, we do a lot of work sometimes, and it's always nice to see when something comes of it. But just like anything, you know, we can't always solve every crime, and we do our best. And it's always nice to see when our work does end up, you know, we get a subpoena and we can see that our work actually helped solve a potential crime, or at least potentially solve a crime.
Definitely. So what kind of background do you need to be an evidence technician?
So our particular unit has a very wide background. And we have one of our coworkers has a background. He actually, right before this, was in animal control. And so he helped with some of their investigations and some of their crimes. And so he had kind of that unique background that brought him here. Another one of our coworkers used to be a police officer and a detective in a different jurisdiction. So she has kind of that background and wanted to come on this side. And then myself and two of my other coworkers, we come from a more academic approach from forensics. My undergraduate degree and my graduate degree are both in forensic fields. And so that's kind of how I got brought into this. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of get into this. And it's basically, as long as you have an understanding of science and knowing, you know, you don't need to have been the best scientist in the world, but understanding that method, that way of thinking and processing and critical thinking, those are the important things for this kind of an area.
I guess you also want to have that you know, desire to have that outcome that provides justice.
Exactly.
As well.
You know, we all have, you know, we're in this field because it's something that we want to do. It's a field that you don't tend to just happen across. it's something that we want to do, and we're striving to try and make a difference at our level at least. And we all have, you know, sometimes it's that morbid curiosity and that morbid fascination with this side of things. You know, we're not people that are, we're not frightened by blood or any of those things, and we kind of approach a scene going, what can I do to help? And so that's the kind of mindset that we have.
And we need people like that.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining me today to talk about this fascinating subject. And thank you again for letting us tag along and take a peek inside of the forensic unit.
Of course.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Well, that does it for this edition of Peak Life. Be sure to join us next time.